I've got a real treat to share with you today from the treasure trove of Craigslist. We're talking about a 1973 Oldsmobile Toronado, and let me tell you, this isn't your run-of-the-mill classic car. Currently listed at $11,800, this piece of automotive history is begging for a new home. Let's dive into the details, shall we? This Toronado is packing a massive 455 cubic inch V8 engine under its hood, which was quite the powerhouse for its time. But here's where it gets interesting. This big old American luxury car is front-wheel drive. That's right, Oldsmobile was way ahead of the curve with this design, making the Toronado a unique piece of engineering for its era. The seller claims this car is in excellent condition, and from the description, it's hard to argue. They've listed a whole slew of maintenance and upgrades that have been done. We're talking about EFI ignition, fresh paint, new shocks, tires, hoses, belts, the works. They even mention that the transmission has been looked after, which is crucial for a car of this vintage. Now let's address the mileage. The ad mentions 100,000 on the odometer, but in the detailed description, the seller states it's showing 35,000 miles. This could mean the odometer has rolled over once, which wouldn't be unusual for a car approaching its 50th birthday. It's something to clarify with the seller for sure. One of the standout features that caught my eye is the cold AC. Finding a classic car with a functioning air conditioning system is like striking gold, especially in these old luxury cruisers. It'll make those summer drives all the more enjoyable. The Toronado comes with a clean title and an automatic transmission, as you'd expect from a luxury car of this era. It's gas-powered, so no worries about finding specialized fuel. Now, I always aim to be honest with you folks. While this Toronado sounds like it's in great shape, it's always crucial to inspect a classic car in person before making a purchase. Check for any signs of rust, test drive it to ensure everything's running smoothly, and don't be afraid to ask questions about its history and maintenance. All in all, if you're in the market for a well-maintained piece of American automotive history with some unique engineering features, this 1973 Oldsmobile Toronado could be just the ticket. It's a conversation starter, a smooth cruiser, and a testament to the innovation of American car manufacturers in the 1970s. 2. We're diving into a real gem from the golden age of American muscle, a 1966 Buick Skylark GS. This beauty is currently up for grabs at $15,000, and let me tell you, it's got some stories to tell. First off, we're looking at a one-owner car here, folks. That's right, this Skylark has been with the same person since it rolled off the assembly line back in '66. It's a California black plate car, which is always a good sign for rust-free bodies. Speaking of rust, the seller claims there's no rust in the floors, trunk, fenders, or lower rear quarters. That's music to any classic car enthusiast's ears. Under the hood, we've got the original motor and transmission, paired with a 3.08 Posey rear end. This Skylark is packing some serious muscle. Now, let's talk options. This GS is loaded with factory goodies: power steering, power brakes, air conditioning, road wheels, bucket seats, tilt column, console, and a deluxe interior. It's like a time capsule of '60s luxury. The seller has put some work into keeping this beauty running. We're talking new radiator, alternator, fuel pump, smog pump, rebuilt carb, new distributor, starter, complete front and rear brakes, and a new battery. They've even installed a complete new interior in the original color. That's some serious dedication. Now, I always aim to be straight with you folks. While the mechanicals sound solid, and the seller says it runs and drives great, there is one issue to note. The upper body paint needs some attention due to peeling clear coat. But hey, that's not uncommon for a car of this vintage, and it could be a great opportunity to give this Skylark the paint job of your dreams. The odometer shows 101,000 miles, but the seller notes it has rolled over. Given the car's age, that's not surprising, and shouldn't be a deal breaker for a well-maintained vehicle like this. All in all, this 1966 Buick Skylark GS looks like a solid find for any classic car enthusiast. It's got the pedigree, the options, and a whole lot of charm. Sure, it might need a bit of cosmetic love, but with its rust-free body and mechanical upkeep, this Skylark could be your ticket to muscle car heaven. As always, give it a thorough inspection in person before making any decisions. 3. We're taking a look at a real piece of American automotive history, a 1960 Cadillac two-door hardtop that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $11,000. Now let me give you the lowdown on this beauty. First off, we're talking about a one-owner car here, which is pretty remarkable for a vehicle that's over 60 years old. The seller claims it has only 46,000 original miles, which is incredibly low for its age. However, it's worth noting that the odometer is broken, so we'll have to take the seller's word on that mileage. The good news is that this Caddy does run and drive, which is always a plus for a car of this vintage. It's got a clean title, and it's equipped with an automatic transmission, as you'd expect from a luxury car of this era. The seller mentions it's a very solid car overall, which is promising. Now, I always aim to be upfront with you folks, so let's talk about the not-so-great stuff. The seller admits there's some rust on both front floors. This is something you'll definitely want to inspect closely, as floor rust can be a real headache if it's extensive. On the bright side, the seller says that other than the floor rust, the car is in excellent shape. One quirky detail. The seller mentions they have the front windshield for the car. This suggests the windshield might be missing or damaged, so that's something you'll want to factor into your plans if you're considering this Cadillac. The asking price is $11,000, but the seller is open to offers and possibly even trades. Just be aware they're only looking for serious inquiries. No scam texts, please. All in all, this 1960 Cadillac two-door hardtop could be a great project for the right enthusiast. It's got a lot going for it with its one-owner history and claimed low mileage. The fact that it runs and drives is a big plus. However, that floor rust is definitely something to consider carefully. As always, I'd recommend a thorough in-person inspection before making any decisions. Remember, cars like this are more than just vehicles. They're time machines that take us back to the golden age of American automobiles. Whether you're looking to restore it to its former glory or just cruise it as is, this Cadillac could be your ticket to some serious vintage style. 4. We're diving into a real piece of American muscle. A 1977 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am that's currently up for grabs at $12,000 firm. Now, let me break this down for you, warts and all. First off, this bird's got some serious power under the hood with that Pontiac 400 engine. The seller's honest about not knowing the engine's mileage, but hey, that's not uncommon for a car of this vintage. What's really interesting is the Tremec TKX transmission, with only about 1,000 miles on it. That's a sweet upgrade for any gearhead. Now, the seller claims it runs and drives well, which is always a good start. But let's talk about some of the quirks. The odometer's broken, so the 43,600 miles shown might not be accurate. Most gauges work, but the tach is out of commission. The body's mostly straight, but there are a couple of trim pieces that have fallen off, though the seller still has them. Here's where it gets a bit tricky. The hood bird and Trans Am logo on the back were painted on, not original decals. They apparently look good from a distance, but up close, well, you might notice. The seller has checked the numbers though, and confirms it is a genuine Trans Am. Now let's talk about some of the issues. The power windows are non-functional. The doors are described as finicky, interpret that as you will, and the radio's kaput. There's also a hole in the floor next to the gear shifter. That's something you'll definitely want to check out in person. On the plus side, the seller's throwing in some extras: door seals, a window motor, a Dixie horn, yeehaw, a slightly dirty car cover, and even the old drive shaft if you want it. Look, I always aim to be straight with you folks. This Firebird isn't perfect, but it could be a great project car for the right enthusiast. It's got that iconic Trans Am style, a powerful engine, and an upgraded transmission. Sure, it needs some TLC, but that's part of the fun with classic cars, right? As always, I'd recommend a thorough in-person inspection before making any decisions. Check out that floor hole, test those finicky doors, and maybe bring a mechanic friend to give the engine a once-over. Remember, cars like this aren't just vehicles. They're time machines that take us back to the era of disco and muscle cars. Whether you're looking to restore it to its former glory or just cruise it as is, this Firebird could be your ticket to some serious 70s cool. 5. We're taking a look at a real gem from the late 70s luxury car scene, a 1979 Lincoln Continental Mark V that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,000. Let me tell you, this land yacht is something special. First off, we're talking about a car with only 43,000 original miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a vehicle that's over 4 decades old, and it really shows in the condition of this Continental. The seller describes it as beautiful and in great original condition, which is music to any classic car lover's ears. Now, let's talk about what makes this Lincoln stand out. It's got that classic white paint job that these luxury boats wore so well, and the seller claims the paint and body are in great original condition with no rust. That's a big deal for a car of this vintage, especially if you're in an area where rust is a common issue. Under the hood, we've got the expected V8 engine, paired with an automatic transmission and rear-wheel drive, the classic American luxury car setup. The seller mentions that it runs and drives great, which is always good to hear. One of the coolest features of this Continental is the power sunroof. That was a pretty fancy option back in '79, and it's great to see it still there and presumably working. Speaking of power features, the seller says it comes with everything power, which likely means power windows, locks, and seats at the very least. Now, I always aim to be upfront with you folks. While the seller doesn't mention any specific issues, it's important to remember that even a well-maintained classic car can have some quirks. Given its age, you'll want to check things like the climate control system, the power accessories, and the sunroof mechanism carefully. The car comes with a clean California title and even has the original California blue plates. That's a nice touch for collectors and could potentially add to the car's value. All in all, this 1979 Lincoln Continental Mark V sounds like a well-preserved piece of American luxury car history. It's got the miles, the condition, and the features that make these cars so desirable to collectors and enthusiasts. As always, I'd recommend seeing it in person, as the seller suggests, and maybe getting a mechanic to give it a once-over before making any decisions. Remember, cars like this aren't just vehicles. They're time capsules that take us back to an era of big, bold American luxury. Whether you're looking to add it to a collection or cruise it on weekends, this Continental could be your ticket to some serious 70s style. 6. We're diving into a true piece of 70s automotive history, a 1975 Chevrolet Monte Carlo that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $11,500. Let me break this down for you, giving you the straight scoop on this survivor. First off, we're looking at a car with only 77,000 original miles. That's pretty impressive for a vehicle pushing 50 years old. The seller claims it's all original, which is always a big draw for collectors and purists alike. Under the hood, we've got the classic 350 cubic inch engine paired with an automatic transmission, a combo that defined smooth cruising in the 70s. Now let's talk about condition. The seller says it runs and drives good, which is always what you want to hear. They're also upfront about the car having manual windows and locks. That's not uncommon for cars of this era. And some folks even prefer the simplicity and reliability of manual controls. Here's where I need to be straight with you. The seller mentions there's minor rust around the rear window. That's something you'll definitely want to check out in person. Rust can be tricky, and what looks minor on the surface could be hiding bigger issues underneath. On the bright side, the seller claims the floors, trunk, and underhood area are all clean with no rust, which is a good sign. The term true survivor gets thrown around a lot in the classic car world. But if this Monte Carlo is as original as the seller claims, it might just earn that title. These cars were often modified or customized over the years, so finding one in original condition is becoming increasingly rare. On the paperwork side, the seller has a clear title, or pink slip as they call it in California, and current registration, which is always a plus when dealing with older vehicles. Look, I always aim to give it to you straight. This Monte Carlo isn't perfect. That rust around the rear window is a concern that you'll want to investigate further. But if you're in the market for a largely original low-mileage example of mid-70s American iron, this could be a great find. As always, I'd recommend seeing the car in person before making any decisions. Get up close with that rust spot, check out the interior, and maybe bring along a mechanic friend to give the engine a once-over. 7. We're diving into a real interesting find on Craigslist, a 1980 Chevrolet Corvette that's currently up for grabs at $15,000. Now, let me give you the lowdown on this C3 Vet, and I promise to keep it real with you. First off, we're looking at a car with only 54,037 original miles on the clock. That's pretty low mileage for a 40-plus-year-old vehicle, which is always a good start. The seller describes the overall condition as good, and they've put some work into sprucing it up. We're talking new custom paint and newly upholstered seats, which should give this classic a fresh look inside and out. Now here's where things get interesting, and I want to be totally upfront about this. This isn't a numbers-matching Corvette anymore. The previous owner swapped out the original L48 engine for a high-performance 327 cubic inch V8. For some purists, this might be a deal-breaker. But for others who prioritize performance over originality, this could be a major plus. The good news is that the seller still has the original motor, which is a huge bonus if you ever want to return the car to its factory specs. The car is equipped with an automatic transmission and, of course, it's rear-wheel drive, just as nature intended for a Corvette. It's got a clean title, which is always reassuring when dealing with classic cars. Look, I always aim to give it to you straight. This Corvette isn't for everyone. If you're looking for a 100% original numbers-matching example, this isn't it. But if you're after a C3 Corvette that's been given some love with fresh paint and interior work, and you don't mind, or maybe even prefer, a performance upgrade under the hood, this could be a great find. As always, I'd recommend seeing the car in person before making any decisions. Check out that custom paint job up close, sit in those newly upholstered seats, and definitely take it for a spin to feel how that 327 performs. And don't forget to take a look at that original engine they're including. That's a valuable piece right there. Remember, cars like this aren't just vehicles. They're time machines that take us back to the era of big hair and even bigger horsepower. Whether you're looking to cruise it as is or embark on a project to return it to original specs, this Corvette could be your ticket to some serious 80s cool. 8. We're taking a look at a true land yacht from the late 70s, a 1979 Lincoln Continental Mark V that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,700. Let me break this down for you, giving you the straight scoop on this luxurious piece of American automotive history. First off, we're talking about a car with only 44,000 miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a vehicle that's over 4 decades old, and it really speaks to how well this Continental has been cared for. The seller mentions it's been kept garaged for years, which is always music to a classic car lover's ears. Now let's talk about condition. The seller describes it as clean inside and out, which is promising. They specifically mention the leather interior, which, if it's in good shape, can be a real selling point for these luxury cars. The AC and stereo are also noted as working, which is great news. Nobody wants to cruise in a 70s land yacht without cool air and tunes. Under the hood, we can assume we're dealing with a V8 engine, though the seller doesn't specify which one. It's paired with an automatic transmission, as you'd expect in a luxury car of this era. The seller says it runs great, which is always what you want to hear about a classic car. One thing that stands out is the clean title. That's always a plus when dealing with older vehicles, as it can help avoid potential headaches down the road. Now, I always aim to be straight with you folks. While the seller doesn't mention any specific issues, it's important to remember that even a well-maintained classic car can have some quirks. Given its age, you'll want to check things like the climate control system, the power accessories, and the overall condition of the body and undercarriage carefully. The seller is firm on the price and isn't interested in trades. So if you're considering this Continental, be prepared to show up with $8,700 in cash. All in all, this 1979 Lincoln Continental Mark V sounds like a well-preserved piece of American luxury car history. It's got low miles, a clean title, and appears to be in good condition inside and out. As always, I'd recommend seeing it in person and maybe getting a mechanic to give it a once-over before making any decisions. 9. We're diving into a real gem from the 70s, a 1978 Chevrolet El Camino that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $15,000. Let me break this down for you, giving you the straight scoop on this unique car-truck hybrid. First off, we're looking at a vehicle that the seller claims is in phenomenal condition. Now that's a bold statement, but let's dig into the details. Under the hood, we've got a 350 V8 engine, which is a solid, reliable power plant that's known for its durability and performance. The seller mentions they've driven it for 2 summers and had it recently serviced, which is always good to hear. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The odometer shows 14,000 kilometers counter. That's about 8,700 miles for us Americans. However, the seller clarifies that this mileage is on the engine, and they're not sure about the body. This suggests we might be dealing with an engine swap or rebuild at some point in the vehicle's life. The seller's been putting some work into this El Camino. They've had the brakes and rotors done in September, along with suspension work. That's a good sign that they've been maintaining it well. Now, I always aim to give it to you straight, so let's talk about the issues the seller's upfront about. The gas gauge is inaccurate, which can be a bit of a pain but isn't a deal breaker. The rims are noticeably scratched and the left headlight is slightly cracked. These are all cosmetic issues that could be addressed relatively easily. One big plus is that the seller says there's next to no rust. For a car from the 70s, that's pretty impressive and suggests it's been well cared for or spent a lot of time in a dry climate. The El Camino comes with a clean title, an automatic transmission, and that eye-catching orange paint job. It's rear-wheel drive, of course, as all proper El Caminos should be. Look, I always aim to be honest with you folks. This El Camino sounds like it's in pretty good shape overall, but there are a few questions I'd want to ask if I were considering buying it. I'd want to know more about that engine. When was it installed or rebuilt? I'd also want to get a better idea of the true mileage on the body and chassis. As always, I'd recommend seeing the car in person before making any decisions. Check out those cosmetic issues, look for any signs of rust or wear that might not be visible in photos, and definitely take it for a test drive. 10. We're diving into a real barn-find gem, a 1963 Ford Galaxie 500 XL that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,000. Now, let me give you the lowdown on this piece of American automotive history, warts and all. First off, we're looking at what was originally a factory 4-speed 390 cubic inch V8 car. That's a desirable combo for these Galaxies. However, and here's where I need to be straight with you, the engine currently in the car is a 360. Not only that, but the seller admits the engine is now stuck after the car was parked for who knows how long. So right off the bat, we're looking at a project that's going to need some serious mechanical attention. The odometer shows 10,000 miles, but the seller notes it has rolled over. Given the age of the car, that's not surprising, and the true mileage is anyone's guess. Now let's talk body condition. The seller describes it as good overall, but there's a big caveat. The floor on the passenger side is bad. On the plus side, the seller has panels for the repair, which is a nice bonus. Still, floor rust can be tricky, and you'll want to inspect this carefully. Here's some good news. The seller has invested over $3,500 in custom upholstery that's ready to be installed. They also mention having many new parts, which could save you some hunting and expense down the line. Another interesting tidbit, the sale includes a 4-door parts car. That could be a gold mine for hard-to-find trim pieces or other bits you might need for the restoration. Look, I always aim to give it to you straight. This Galaxie is a project car through and through. It's not running, it needs floor work, and it's not even sporting its original engine. But for the right enthusiast, this could be a diamond in the rough. The 500 XL was a desirable trim level, and these early 60s Galaxies have a great look when they're all cleaned up. As always, I'd recommend seeing the car in person before making any decisions. Check out that floor rust carefully, inspect the stuck engine, and take a good look at all those new parts and that upholstery kit. Remember, cars like this aren't just vehicles. They're time machines that take us back to the early 60s, when American cars were big, bold, and beautiful. If you got the skills, time, and patience for a serious project, this Galaxie could be your ticket to owning a piece of Ford history. 11. We're taking a look at a 1979 Cadillac Seville that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $7,000. Now, let me break this down for you, giving you the straight scoop on this piece of late 70s luxury. First off, we're looking at a car with 61,000 miles on the clock. That's pretty low for a vehicle that's over 4 decades old, which is always a good sign. The seller claims it's in excellent condition, which is a bold statement for a car of this vintage. Under the hood, we've got the expected V8 engine, paired with an automatic transmission and rear-wheel drive, the classic American luxury car setup. The seller says it runs great and starts right up, which is music to any classic car lover's ears. Now the seller mentions that the car has a lot new part. Their words, not mine. While they don't specify what these new parts are, it suggests that some work has been done to keep this Seville in good shape. They also highlight a nice top and nice paint, which implies the exterior is in good condition. One of the most intriguing things the seller says is, "Not a project car. Jump in and hit the show." That's a pretty confident statement, suggesting this Seville is ready to roll without needing immediate work. Now, I always aim to be straight with you, folks. While the seller's description is overwhelmingly positive, it's also quite brief and lacks specific details. They don't mention anything about the interior condition, the status of the electronics, or any potential issues. With a car this old, even one in excellent condition, there are usually a few quirks or minor problems to be aware of. It's also worth noting that while 61,000 miles is low for the car's age, these old luxury cars can still have age-related issues, even with low mileage. Rubber components, for example, can deteriorate over time, regardless of how much the car has been driven. As always, I'd recommend seeing the car in person before making any decisions. Check out that paint job up close, inspect the interior thoroughly, and definitely take it for a test drive to see how it performs. Remember, cars like this aren't just vehicles. They're time capsules that take us back to an era of big, bold American luxury. If this Seville is as good as the seller claims, it could be a great find for someone looking for a classic Cadillac that's ready to show off right away. 12. We're diving into a real interesting piece from the mid-70s, a 1976 Oldsmobile Omega that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $6,900. Let me break this down for you, giving you the straight scoop on this often overlooked Olds. First off, we're looking at a car that the seller describes as being in good condition. Now, that's a pretty broad term in the classic car world, but let's dig into the details they've provided. Under the hood, we've got a 350 cubic inch V8 engine paired with a 350 transmission, a solid, reliable powertrain combo from GM. Here's where things get interesting. The seller says both the engine and transmission have been rebuilt. That's a big plus for anyone looking for a classic that's ready to hit the road without immediate major mechanical work. The odometer shows 100,000 miles, but with that rebuilt drivetrain, the mileage on the critical components is likely much lower. The seller also mentions a new exhaust system, which is always nice to hear, pun intended. Now, here's a crucial bit of info for our California friends or anyone in a state with strict emissions laws. This Omega reportedly passes smog and comes with a clean title. That's a big deal for a car from this era, as many struggle to meet modern emission standards. The car is painted white and has an automatic transmission, which is pretty standard fare for these Omegas. It's rear-wheel drive, of course, as all proper American cars of this era should be. Look, I always aim to give it to you straight. While the seller's description is pretty positive, it's also quite brief. They don't mention anything about the condition of the body, interior, or electrical systems. With a car this age, even one in good condition, there are usually a few quirks or minor issues to be aware of. It's also worth noting that while the Omega shares a platform with the more popular Chevy Nova, it doesn't quite have the same following. This can be a double-edged sword. Parts might be a bit harder to find, but you're also less likely to see another one at a car show. As always, I'd recommend seeing the car in person before making any decisions. Check out that paint job up close, inspect the interior thoroughly, and definitely take it for a test drive to see how those rebuilt mechanicals perform. Remember, cars like this aren't just vehicles, they're time capsules that take us back to the mid-70s, an interesting transitional period in American car design. If you're looking for a classic that's a bit off the beaten path but still has that quintessential 70s American car vibe, this Omega could be your ticket. 13. We're taking a look at a real land yacht from the early 70s, a 1973 Cadillac DeVille that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $10,250. Let me break this down for you, giving you the straight scoop on this piece of American luxury. First off, we're looking at a coupe version of the DeVille, which is always a bit more desirable than the sedan. The seller describes it as being in excellent condition, which is a bold claim for a car that's pushing 50 years old. They're backing that up by saying it's very clean and 99% rust-free. Music to the ears of anyone who's dealt with rust issues on classic cars. Under the hood, we've got the expected V8 engine, though the seller doesn't specify which one. In 73, you could get these with either a 472 or 500 cubic inch behemoth, both of which were known for their smooth power delivery. It's paired with an automatic transmission and rear-wheel drive, as all proper luxury cars of this era should be. The odometer shows 70,850 miles, which isn't too bad for a car of this vintage. Of course, with older cars, you always have to take mileage readings with a grain of salt, but it's not an unbelievable number. Now here's where the seller's description gets interesting. They say it starts, runs, stops, and drives as it should. That's a pretty comprehensive statement about the car's mechanical condition. If true, it suggests this DeVille is ready to cruise without needing immediate major work. The car is painted brown, which was a popular color in the 70s, and suits these big caddies well. It comes with a clean title, which is always a plus when dealing with classic cars. Look, I always aim to give it to you straight. While the seller's description is overwhelmingly positive, it's also quite brief. They don't mention anything about the condition of the interior, the status of the electronics, or any potential issues. With a car this old, even one in excellent condition, there are usually a few quirks or minor problems to be aware of. As always, I'd recommend seeing the car in person before making any decisions. Check out that paint job up close, inspect the interior thoroughly, and definitely take it for a test drive to see how it performs. Pay special attention to things like the air conditioning, power windows, and other luxury features that these cars were known for. 14. We're diving into a real gem from the mid-60s, a 1966 Plymouth Belvedere 2 that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $14,500. Let me break this down for you, giving you the straight scoop on this piece of American muscle. First off, we're looking at what the seller claims is a one-owner car. That's pretty rare for a vehicle that's over half a century old, and it suggests this Belvedere has been well cared for throughout its life. The seller says it's been garage kept, which is always good news for preserving these classics. Under the hood, we've got a V8 engine, though the seller doesn't specify which one. In 66, these could come with anything from a 273 cubic inch small block to a big 440. So that's definitely something you'd want to clarify. It's paired with an automatic transmission, which was a popular choice for these cars. Now here's where things get interesting. The odometer shows 10,000 miles, but given the age of the car, it's likely rolled over at least once. The seller doesn't mention if this is original mileage or not, so that's another point to clarify. The seller claims the car is all original, including the paint, which is pretty impressive if true. They also mention it has power steering and air conditioning, which were desirable options back in the day, and make the car much more enjoyable to drive now. One of the most promising aspects is that the seller says there's no rust, and the body is clean. Rust is often the bane of classic car enthusiasts, so a rust-free example is always desirable. They also mention having the original wheels, which is a nice bonus for authenticity. Now, I always aim to give it to you straight. While the seller's description is pretty positive, it's also quite brief and a bit jumbled. They say it runs and drives, but don't give any details about its mechanical condition or if any work has been done recently. With a car this old, even one that's been well maintained, there are usually a few quirks or minor issues to be aware of. As always, I'd recommend seeing the car in person before making any decisions. Check out that original paint job up close, inspect the interior thoroughly, and definitely take it for a test drive. Pay special attention to how that V8 runs and how the transmission shifts. 15. Let's dive deeper into this 1968 Oldsmobile Delta 88 that's currently listed on Craigslist for $10,000. This classic American sedan is a real piece of automotive history, and it's got a lot to offer for enthusiasts and collectors alike. First off, let's talk about the power plant. This Delta 88 is equipped with a robust 4.5 cubic inch V8 engine, which was known for its impressive torque and smooth power delivery. Paired with an automatic transmission and rear-wheel drive, this setup was quintessential for full-size American cars of the era. With 87,000 original miles on the odometer, this engine likely has plenty of life left in it, especially considering these old Oldsmobile V8s were built to last. The seller describes the overall condition as excellent, which is promising for a car of this vintage. It's rust-free, which is a significant selling point for any classic car, especially one from the 1960s. The green paint color is a classic choice for this era, and when combined with the four-door hardtop body style, it creates a striking profile that's sure to turn heads. However, in the interest of full disclosure, there are a few issues that potential buyers should be aware of. The air conditioning clutch needs replacement, though the seller mentions they have the part. There's a minor exhaust manifold leak that needs attention, and the trunk paint has faded considerably. The vinyl top shows signs of wear, and there's a dent in the rear bumper that would need to be addressed if you're aiming for show-quality condition. The seller also mentions that the car currently rides on bias ply tires, which provide a period-correct look but don't offer the same handling characteristics as modern radials. Switching to radial tires would improve the car's road manners if that's a concern for you. Despite these minor issues, this Oldsmobile Delta 88 appears to be a solid example of late 1960s American automotive design. It represents an era when cars were big, powerful, and styled with an unmistakable flair. The hardtop design, with its pillarless look when the windows are down, is particularly appealing and increasingly rare in today's market. For the asking price of $10,000, this could be a great opportunity for someone looking to get into classic car ownership or add to their collection. While it may need some work to bring it to show-quality condition, it sounds like a good driver that could be enjoyed immediately while you address the minor issues over time. Remember, cars like this are not just vehicles, they're rolling history. This Delta 88 has survived over 5 decades and still runs well. That's a testament to its build quality and the care it's received over the years. Whether you're looking for a weekend cruiser, a project car, or a piece of automotive nostalgia, this 1968 Oldsmobile Delta 88 deserves a close look. 16. We're checking out a real classic, a 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,000. This beauty is a testament to the golden age of American muscle cars, and it's got some serious appeal for collectors and enthusiasts alike. Let's dive into what we've got here. This Grand Prix is packing a mighty 455 cubic inch V8 engine rated at 325 horsepower. That's a lot of muscle under the hood, folks. The seller says it runs great, which is always good to hear for a car that's over half a century old. It's got an automatic transmission, making it a comfortable cruiser. And of course, it's rear-wheel drive, just as a proper muscle car should be. The odometer shows 100,000 miles, which isn't too bad for a car of this vintage. It's finished in black, which, when done right, can make these old Pontiacs look absolutely menacing. The seller describes the overall condition as good, which is promising. But remember, good can mean different things to different people. Now, let's talk about some of the work that's been done. The seller mentions that the seats have new upholstery, which is a big plus. Nothing ruins the look of a classic interior quite like worn-out seats, so this is a nice touch. However, we've got to keep it real here. The seller's description is pretty brief, which leaves a lot of questions unanswered. They mention that lots of work has been done, but don't specify what exactly. It would be wise to ask for more details about recent maintenance, repairs, or upgrades. Also, while the seller describes it as a nice car, we don't have any information about the condition of the body, the paint, the chrome, or the undercarriage. For a car this old, these are crucial factors to consider. Rust can be a real issue with these old beauties, so you'd want to give it a thorough inspection. The good news is that it comes with a clean title, which is always a plus when dealing with classic cars. At $9,000, this Grand Prix could be a decent deal if everything checks out. These cars have a strong following, and the 455 engine is highly desirable. However, as with any classic car purchase, you'll want to see it in person, get under it, and maybe even have a trusted mechanic take a look before making a decision. In conclusion, this 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix has the potential to be a great classic cruiser or a solid starting point for a restoration project. It's got the right engine, the right look, and some recent improvements. But as always with classics, do your due diligence. Ask questions, get more photos, and inspect it thoroughly. If everything checks out, you could be cruising in pure 60s style for a reasonable price. 17. Let's talk about this 1979 Chrysler 300 that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $12,000. This classic American coupe is a bit of a rare bird, representing the last gasp of Chrysler's full-size luxury performance cars before the downsizing era really took hold. First off, let's appreciate what we've got here. This 300 is powered by a 360 cubic inch V8, which was a solid performer for its time. It's paired with an automatic transmission, making it a comfortable cruiser. With rear-wheel drive and only 78,000 miles on the clock, this car still has plenty of life left in it. The seller describes the condition as good, and there are some features worth noting. It's got the full gauge package, including a tachometer, which is always nice to see in a car of this vintage. The clock works, which might seem small, but anyone who's dealt with old car electronics knows that's a win. Bucket seats and a console add a sporty touch to the interior, and the presence of air conditioning and cruise control means this car is equipped for comfortable long-distance driving. Now, let's be real about a few things. The seller mentions that the car is rust-free except for the trunk lid. That's good news overall, but it does mean there's some rust to deal with. Depending on how bad it is, fixing that trunk lid could be a simple job or a more involved project. The many new parts mentioned is intriguing, but without specifics, it's hard to know exactly what's been replaced or upgraded. This would be a good point to ask for more details if you're seriously interested. At $12,000, this Chrysler 300 is priced at the higher end for a '79 model. However, these cars are becoming increasingly rare, especially in good condition. The low mileage and overall good condition could justify the price if everything checks out in person. One thing to keep in mind, the seller states they need no help selling. This suggests they're firm on the price and probably won't be open to much negotiation. They seem confident in what they're offering. In conclusion, this 1979 Chrysler 300 represents an interesting piece of American automotive history. It's from an era when big, powerful cars were on their way out, making it something of a last hurrah for its class. If you're into late 70s American luxury performance cars and don't mind dealing with a bit of rust repair, this could be a cool addition to your collection. Just be sure to inspect it thoroughly in person and maybe get a mechanic's opinion before making a decision. 18. We're diving into a real gem that's popped up on Craigslist, a 1975 Ford Ranchero Squire, priced at $15,000. This isn't your average pickup. It's a unique blend of car and truck that Ford perfected in the 70s, and this one's a real beauty. Let's start with the heart of this beast, a 400 cubic inch V8 with a 2-barrel carb. It might not be the most powerful setup, but it's got plenty of grunt for cruising and light hauling. The seller reports it runs smooth and can easily hit 80 mph on the highway, which is impressive for a 48-year-old vehicle. Now the odometer shows 25,474 miles, but the seller notes it has rolled over, so we're likely looking at 125,474 miles or more. Despite the mileage, this Ranchero seems to be in excellent condition. It's had a recent repaint in its original white, and they've added new vinyl wood grain, giving it that classic 70s look. The Krager Raider-style mag wheels and new tires really set it off, and the dual Flowmaster exhaust should give it a nice rumble. The interior is where this Ranchero really shines. The original two-tone blue interior is described as being in amazingly good condition, with bright colors and no cracks in the dash or door panels. There are a couple of minor issues: a small burn mark on the passenger seat and a missing button cap on the driver's seat, but these are minor considering the age. Now let's be honest about a few things. The AC, cruise control, radio, and tilt wheel all need attention. These aren't deal breakers, but they're projects you'll need to tackle if you want everything functioning. The seller has clearly enjoyed this car, having just completed a 300-mile road trip. They report no major mechanical issues, with good starting, smooth transmission shifts, straight stopping, and effortless power steering. At $15,000, this Ranchero is priced well below fully restored examples, which can fetch $27,000 to $36,000 or more. It's a great opportunity to get into a classic that you can enjoy right away while gradually addressing the minor issues. In conclusion, if you're in the market for a unique classic that blends car comfort with pickup practicality, this 1975 Ford Ranchero Squire deserves a serious look. It's a head-turner that's mechanically sound and ready to cruise. Just be prepared to tackle those minor electrical issues, and you'll have a sweet ride for cars and coffee, shows, or just cruising around town. 19. Let's talk about a real gem that's just popped up on Craigslist. A 1970 Rover TC 2000 priced at $7,900. This isn't your run-of-the-mill classic. We're looking at a piece of British automotive history that you don't see every day. The Rover TC 2000 was a sporty variant of the Rover P6 series, known for its innovative design and advanced features for its time. This particular model is powered by a 4-cylinder engine, which might not sound impressive, but remember, this was designed for spirited driving on British B roads, not drag racing on American streets. What's really exciting is that this Rover comes with a manual transmission. That's going to give you a much more engaging driving experience, really letting you feel connected to this piece of history. With rear-wheel drive, you can expect some classic handling characteristics that modern cars just can't replicate. The seller describes the condition as good, which is promising for a car that's over half a century old. They mention that it runs and looks good, which is exactly what you want to hear. The odometer shows 80,000 miles, which isn't too bad for its age, but as always with classics, take that with a grain of salt. Now let's talk about the recent work that's been done, because this is crucial for a car of this vintage. The seller mentions a new carburetor, new head gasket, new starter, and a new electronic ignition system. They've also done an oil and filter change and a tune-up. This is all great news because it suggests that the car has been cared for and should be in good running condition. The body is described as all stock, which is a big plus for collectors who value originality. It's finished in white, which, if in good condition, can look really sharp on these old Rovers. However, let's be real here. This is a 53-year-old British car, and they weren't exactly known for their reliability even when new. While the recent work is encouraging, you should expect to do some tinkering and maintenance if you plan to drive this regularly. Parts might not be as easy to come by as they would for, say, a classic Mustang or Camaro. At $7,900, this Rover TC 2000 could be a great entry point into classic British car ownership. It's priced reasonably for what it is, especially considering the recent work. But remember, you're not just buying a car here, you're buying an experience and a piece of automotive history. 20. Let's dive into this 1984 Ford Thunderbird that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $3,000. This 8th-generation T-Bird represents an interesting era in Ford's history, and it's got some potential for the right buyer. First off, let's talk about what's under the hood. This Thunderbird is packing the 302 cubic inch V8, That's 5.0 liters for you metric folks, which is a solid, reliable engine with a great aftermarket following. It's paired with an automatic transmission and rear-wheel drive, giving you that classic American car feel. The seller describes the condition as good and decent, which is pretty fair for a car that's pushing 40 years old. They mention it's been sitting for 6 years, which is something to keep in mind. Cars don't always like to sit idle for long periods. Now, let's be real about the mileage. The odometer shows 26,153, but the seller believes it's rolled over, putting the actual mileage at around 126,000. That's not terrible for a car of this age, but it's definitely something to consider. On the plus side, the seller reports that the car still runs amazing, which is encouraging. They've also replaced some key items: new high beams and dim lights, and a new ignition switch. The heater works, turn signals are operational, and the cruise control functions. All good news for a car of this vintage. However, there are a few issues to note. The radio turns on but doesn't really play, which could be a simple fix or a sign of larger electrical gremlins. Also, given that it's been sitting for 6 years, you'll want to give all the rubber components a thorough check: hoses, belts, bushings, etc. The seller is upfront about the car's history: no accidents, no thefts, and a clean title. That's all positive stuff. They're also offering test drives, which is always a good sign. At $3,000, this Thunderbird could be a decent deal for the right person. It's not going to be a show car right off the bat, but it could be a fun project or a cool daily driver with some work. These 80s T-Birds have a unique style that's starting to come back into fashion, and with the 302 V8, you've got a good foundation for some performance upgrades if that's your thing. In conclusion, if you're looking for an affordable entry into classic car ownership, or if you've got a soft spot for 80s Fords, this 1984 Thunderbird might be worth checking out. Just go into it with your eyes open. Expect to do some work, but you could end up with a pretty cool ride for not a lot of money. As always, a thorough inspection and test drive are crucial before making any decisions.